So the Event Manager blog earlier this year released some statistics saying that about 25% of us event professionals have made a successful transition to virtual. It's like a super low number, and I was very curious to see who exactly these people were. So I reached out to somebody named Chloe Mandell. Based in Portland, Oregon, her company Mandell Experiences can confidently say that they are virtual event experts. Chloe has over 10 years of experience, and among many other things, she can include the 2016 Rio Olympics, as well as the American X Games on her resume. Chloe is extremely thoughtful. She provides very intelligent and very clear answers, so make sure that you grab a pen, take some really good notes, because you're about to learn a lot from her. This is Jason Greenman. You're listening to Breakouts, where I invite the top event professionals from around the world to come and share their stories and their experiences with us. So without further ado, here's Chloe. Good morning, Chloe. Thank you for joining us today, so early in the morning on the West Coast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Of course. So I've brought you on today to discuss something many of us, not just in events, are adjusting to, but most people around the world, and that's the idea of moving to digital. And I know that you've done this quite successfully yourself with your own events business. And so really to get things started, to kick it off, maybe you could just give us a short overview of your business so listeners have an idea, have a bit of context as to your background.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, USA, and my company is Mandell Experiences. We offer an integrated approach to events. So our kind of little tagline is plan it, fund it, promote it, run it. So you do need right butts and seats. So you gotta market what you put together, as well as we do have a really comprehensive network of sponsors that can help kind of augment some revenue streams, and then making sure that the delivery is just exceptional for all stakeholders.
Very cool. And I know that you have a passion for philosophy, so let's get in there, because this is actually tied into what we're going to talk about today. And part of this change and this adaptation, it has to do directly with the whole industry of events. And I think a lot of people have a different idea of how to define events. And the last time we spoke, I really appreciated your insights on that kind of, I know it's a big topic, but how would you define events from more of like a macro point of view?
Yeah, it's so fun to kind of think in this way. Never would I thought to be asking myself, what is an event? But the more you look at the virtual or digital capabilities, I always kind of encourage my clients to think kind of going down two different roads. Do you want a show, kind of just like a TV show where, there's one-way communication, it's output towards you? Or do you want that two-way communication? And that to me is really what an event is. There's that engagement piece where the audience actually is influencing the content. Maybe it's something as simple as through YouTube. There's all sorts of apps out there now where you can pull a question that was from the chat onto the screen. That's impacting the content that others are seeing. Maybe it's something where on a panel you leave a blank seat for an audience member to sit in. And that's a kind of fun way to really, really bring someone into the fold. But there's lots of ways where you can make people feel involved. And when you have that co-creation, there's more buy-in, and it just creates a really dynamic, unique experience. And that's the other thing about live events, is you're not sure what's going to happen. And that is another kind of plus, and why people would tune into something live versus on demand. We're also seeing that difference. So I wanted to kind of just throw that other element in. But really, if you were to distill it, an event involves that two-way communication.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of defining it. And because I think as event planners, we have this going digital, put your content in competition with content that exists on YouTube, on the hundreds of blogs and platforms that are out there where there might be a similar type of content that somebody's been writing about or has recorded about in the past. And I think it's really insightful that the main difference there is the ability to interact and actually influence what happens during the event. You can't do that to something that's been pre-recorded.
Yep.
And I mean, the word in events for the last 6 months is a word I think some of us have come to disdain a little bit, and that's the big P word, the pivot. And I think that you had an idea that you prefer to use the word evolve rather than pivot. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit more? Why it's more of an evolution rather than a pure pivot?
Yeah, certainly. I think, right now it's a great time to try things. And so, not to get too into semantics, but if we think of pivoting, it means that, we're no longer doing the previous aspects. So live events may come, will hopefully come back soon. Obviously in a safe manner. They're actually they are happening now in a safe way. A lot of venues are accommodating. So there is that evolution, right? You're just kind of adding it into your toolbox, the ability to produce virtually. And I do kind of really like thinking that even our own businesses are dynamic and can evolve, right? And but no matter how you look at it, just having that open mind and willingness to think outside the box, both in you as a business person, what can you offer, as well as maybe you as the client, and how can you serve your member base, or serve your brand in thinking this way. So evolution is a little bit more approachable to me as well. There's maybe a slight stigma against pivot, like, oh, before it was bad, which is just not at all the case. We're just responding to the environment.
Totally. Yeah, I have the same sort of idea that generally in business, if you're pivoting, it's because your original idea didn't work, right? And I mean, we're still producing events at the end of the day. It's not that we have to stop producing events and pivot to some totally new service line. We're still looking for engagement and interaction, educating the attendees. It's just that the platform may have changed a bit. So yeah, I totally agree with the evolution. I think we should create a movement.
Yeah, I'm not the only one. I've heard it a couple times now, and I completely agree as well.
Yeah. And now you've been around and worked with sporting events. So kind of sticking on this idea of evolution, because I think in the events world, a lot of people are approaching this as something that's completely new, that we've never experienced before. This whole idea of a virtual event or a hybrid event, as if it's some brand new thing that's come onto the scene. But I think you, having worked in sports before, have made a very good point about this too, which is they've been producing live events alongside kind of a virtual production of the same event, or a digital production of that. Can you explain that a little bit more in depth for the listeners?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I served as a lead coordinator at X Games. I was a hospitality manager at the Rio Olympics. And so that's just, and I was freelancing at that point, but it really is remarkable to see the level of production that goes into both experiences. So sports have been doing this ever since there was TV, right? And it's, it's why ESPN is a brand. And I think it's really interesting to think of those two events essentially overlapping, where even the sporting events that I produced, I produce a lot of large scale rock climbing competitions of all things, which is really fun. So we have, 100,000 live stream viewers tuning in live to watch one of the larger climbing competitions in the country, if not the world. And it's really important to know when are the commercial breaks, so that those two overlapping run of shows, if you will, are in sync, and you're creating fun entertainment, maybe, just as you see if you've been to any major, league sporting event. Those commercial breaks are good times to engage the audience, as well as then give commercial and sponsor time for your big brands. But another thing that is important to think about is just that, level of communication then that's needed too. So even though there's two productions, it's really important that there's a bit of glue in between those two. And so maybe how that would translate right to virtual is if you are working in a studio where there's any sort of on-site experience, if you're working especially in hybrid, this has become more and more important. Just thinking about those two separate audiences as almost two separate events will help you really do do justice to both audiences and make sure that their experience is equal but different, right?
Right. And so when you approach kind of a virtual event, or I guess what we expect to come back, which is more of a hybrid model where you have the live event alongside a virtual event, you would really approach that as maybe two separate strategies, kind of two models on top of each other running in parallel. Is that right?
Absolutely. So it can go, depending on your budget or just, your resources, even having two separate teams can be helpful. The way that a virtual audience engages with an event is different than on-site. We've already seen this, that content has to be a little bit shorter because not everyone can, tune in for, say, an 8-hour conference.
Right.
So you got to chop it up a bit.
Yeah.
Other things that are different is just that networking piece. So really thinking strategically around the technological tools, and also whether it's important for your virtual audience to engage with one another and the on-site audience, or maybe they're kind of in their bubble and in addition, on-site may or may not know that a virtual audience is there. I think there's some really great event apps that involve, especially for conferences, some engagement, especially with speaker Q&A, where anyone from anywhere can join. The key there is live and making sure that your technology is up to snuff, so to speak, that the Wi-Fi is creating a live experience in sync for anyone around the world.
Okay. The networking is an interesting one, because I've seen a lot of people struggle with the how should I put that? It's not as difficult in some ways to put the content online or to make the content digital, but getting the level of engagement and networking that you would have at a live event, that sort of networking in a virtual space seems to be a bit more of a challenge. People are struggling with how to do that. What has worked for you? Is there any, do you have any tips or advice for people that are trying to get more, I guess, greater networking outcomes from their virtual events?
Sure. First off, I would definitely think of, that right now we are in the age of mindset. So all these challenges that we're confronting, if you can view those as opportunities. And so this is where it's really interesting to look at the technology that's out there and maybe explore ways that you haven't even leveraged, previously on site, such things as AI matchmaking. If people build out their profiles and then the technology can be like, hey, you should talk to Susan, you guys would really get along. That's really exciting, actually. So I personally think this is a wonderful time to just kind of really see what's out there, experiment. People have a really high tolerance for change at the moment,
Totally.
as we well know. And so if you're ever going to try something that's brand new and, you might feel like you don't know what you're doing, now is actually the best time to do that. And when it comes to really answering your question around engagement, I think just making sure that that kind of every aspect of your event has some component that involves the audience. Again, you're trying not to just talk at them. Even something as simple as having the speaker, take a minute, play some music for a minute and ask people to write in the chat an answer to a question, or maybe bringing them on screen if you have that capability. So various elements like that can just make the audience feel heard, feel that they know, even though especially it's hard with Zoom, sometimes we can't even see one another. And so how do you create that feeling? And I was really fortunate in the last virtual event I did, we had an attendee actually email us that she said when she logged out of the platform that day, that she had the same feeling of sadness as when she leaves an on-site event. And that to me was just outstanding. It means we did our job well, and we created that sense of community, of belonging that I think everyone seeks out events for in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially the goal. If you can get somebody to feel that way when they're logging out of their computer, that's, I would say that you've accomplished a very significant milestone with that attendee.
Yeah.
And I mean, we kind of have been talking about this move to virtual, and I think we've both experienced it. There's two types of people. It seems like there's kind of this camp that that has seen it. They got the Zoom burnout very quickly, and have kind of said, screw virtual. Live is always going to be better, so I'm just going to wait until live events comes back. Versus the people who are kind of curious and willing to experiment and are just kind of accepting that this is a part and will always be a part of future events. Why is there a difference, and how can we, I guess, encourage people to give virtual a fair chance?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about those people, I think, specifying that it's the event organizers that I see, kind of those two camps of organizers, maybe the clients too. So if you're an organization that usually throws events, some people have embraced them, some people haven't. And I can't really speak to why someone would think one way or the other. I do know that, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we have a certain degree of familiarity, I should say, with risk and fear. Mm-hmm. And so just playing around with that, we are now, our brains are kind of wired to keep us safe. So that's why anytime we're pushed outside of our comfort zone, it's your brain telling you like you're about to die. So that's, on the biological level. More importantly, right. I think what the takeaway should be is that, that's totally natural to feel that fear. And I'm a rock climber myself. So, you can find all sorts of sports analogies for maybe sports that you do as well.
Sure.
But really kind of then seeing that mindset, taking those obstacles as opportunities. And I find exploration to be really fun. It's like I kind of view virtual events a little bit like the movie Inception. Like gone are these common notions of even time and space, right? Mm-hmm. So your venue is now, say, a virtual event platform. If you have that, if not, maybe it's Zoom, but space no longer exists in the same way as we had it before, where we're all in one physical, building at one time. We're tuning in from potentially all over the world. And then with time, we all of a sudden are interacting. We talked about live engagement, but there's, so much studies around post-event engagement. So a lot of these platforms will provide, recorded on-demand content, and we're seeing a lot of rewatches. And so your content kind of lives on, and making sure that's integrated into your strategy is really important. So to get back to your original topic around kind of the two camps, I think it takes kind of that level of, if you're so used to set in your ways and so used to one thing, that's fine. I'm not here to convince you to go virtual. Sure. What I can just explain from my own experience is that it is neat to see the potential, and then even use this as a wonderful opportunity to learn. So then we can integrate tech back into our on-site experiences once those are possible, to actually augment those through technology. So that's where my head is at right now. I'm constantly thinking, sure, for the, the virtual event I'm producing, but also trying to think even, 3 steps ahead of like, great, how could this make an on-site experience, an attendee really connect, maybe even on-site with an attendee they may not have met, again, through, say, that AI matchmaking. That'd be so cool if you had that, on-site in an event and be like, oh, Tony over there is actually really into cooking, and so are you. Right. Like, go meet up, It's just really cool, the potential. And I can't emphasize enough that time and space can really be played with, and we're creating mini worlds for people. So that's exciting for me.
100%. It's you're creating something that will exist, in forever and in eternity. It's the days of you have a live event and that was fun, and you're scribbling notes because this is the only moment you'll be ever able to see it. I think there still are some events that are run that way, but I totally agree. I mean, if you're able to record and put that into your long-term strategy and cut that up into content throughout the year for your client or for your own business, there's so much opportunity to use the digital product that comes after the event. And And there is a lot of opportunity. And I think what you said about the experimentation is totally on point too. It's, I remember obviously the live events, any little thing that went wrong, which as event planners, we know they tend to do that every once in a while.
Murphy's Law, right?
Murphy's Law.
If it can't go wrong, it will go wrong.
Exactly. You're sweating because, everybody expects perfection, right? It's, if the lights in the hotel go out for 30 seconds, it's not perfect because we've been doing the live events for so long. So the expectations are so high. And I think the expectations are becoming higher for virtual, but as a virtual event producer, you can kind of play with people understand that this is new and people understand that you're experimenting. And I mean, it's a valuable place to come from because you can try new things. And if there's a small problem, people are extremely understanding. I've seen so many events where, there's a technical glitch, everybody jumps onto Twitter and everybody ends up just kind of laughing about it. And there's this camaraderie around the technical glitch, which, you may not have the same response in a physical world. So I totally agree.
I do want to add, if I may, just something to bear in mind around psychology to wrap that. Talk about philosophy, we talk about psychology.
Bring it on, yeah.
It is really important, and I was trying to look up the term real quick, but I know this is wrong, but something around the law of relevancy or something to that effect. It is very important to remember that people's own memories, the way that it works, they're going to remember the very beginning and they're going to remember the very end. So as long as you can make those, you're setting the tone with whatever the start of your event is. And then absolutely it's that feeling you leave them with. And what happens in between, yes, it matters, of course. You want it to do your best job, but I would encourage people to kind of let themselves off the hook, if you will, and remember that kind of psychological reality that how people perceive your event is going to be based off those two things.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, if you're going to nail anything, nail the beginning and the end, right?
Yep, totally. Yeah.
Now, as someone who's evolved successfully, what have been your best resources for learning? Because I know when the lockdown came in, it wasn't regional. It's the first time where this has just been, for example, you're in Portland, Oregon, I'm in Barcelona, and we are going through the exact same experience. It's super unique. It's crazy. I know everybody jumped on to level up, to level up their skills and their education on this. What have been some of your best resources or sources, or how did you go about upping your skills in the virtual world?
Sure. Yeah. I just want to kind of make a plug. I do want to acknowledge that there has been inequality in the way that the coronavirus has affected people of different socioeconomic states as well as race. And so that's important to acknowledge. But when it comes to kind of this overall, state of change, certainly we've had to go through that. I would highly recommend the site Event Manager blog, so EMB. And they have put on some remarkable events themselves. Right at the beginning, they put on an event around pivot to virtual. Then they saw the next kind of outcry of needs was how do we get engagement, just like you were asking, Jason. And then most recently, they put on a hybrid event. And so this is geared towards event producers, but anyone who's interested in this stuff can tune in. And they're about 3 or 4 hours long. So it is great to have access to that content afterwards, because you're not expected to watch it all the way through unless you're super dedicated. But that has been remarkable to hear from experts in the field who maybe have gone through this before or have experimented successfully. In addition, BizBash is another great event industry resource. And lastly, I've just been really inspired by all the groups that are popping up, especially through Facebook. So Event Planners Gather, I believe it's it's hosted by BizBash, but Event Planners Gather is just such a wonderful resource because we're seeing a time now where everyone's really working together. And, I really just kind of grateful for the people that are willing to kind of be vulnerable, ask the tough questions, like, has anyone tried this before? Or, hey, I'm looking for a, video vendor or just anything. And, just the whole community is there to support one another. And so those kind of three have been really special, but do kind of stay connected with the various virtual event platforms, because they're also working really hard to educate people on how to use not only just their specific platform, but just how to produce virtual events. It behooves them that the organizers understand that just the overarching best practices. And so I've seen some actually really neat kind of just quick little 1-hour webinars from various event platforms that have been actually quite good. So yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. The EMB has been great. And I think they've actually got another one coming up on October 15th too. So we can go ahead and plug them there. The Virtual Event Tech Day is on October 15th. Nice. And it's looking like a really good lineup as well. So those are some really, really good recommendations. And I'll try to throw those into the show notes, which we'll put up afterwards as well. And it's again, I think being able to experiment, and I think what you said too about vulnerability is really important. I mean, the events industry, obviously, depending on who you're talking to, has been can feel somewhat kind of closed and secretive at times. And I've been very much inspired by people's willingness to say, I don't know how this works, right? Which is something that is really hard for people to do. And it's been inspiring to see people open up and say, I don't know how this works. Will someone explain it to me? And I think it's really powerful to see those groups form and people just trying to work together.
Totally. Yeah. If you have a relationship with a client, I think the question you can ask them is, or just kind of be really transparent and saying like, yep, this is my first virtual event, but do you trust me to be able to figure it out? Right. And that's really, I think, the relationships that, I'm really fortunate to have. And, I would encourage anyone listening to kind of think in that way of, you're a capable human and person. Right. And yes, we're all in this together. Yeah. But if you have that relationship of trust and of kind of consistency on your deliverables, you're going to deliver. Yes, it'll be new. Yes, you'll learn things. Yes, you'll make mistakes. Like, already accept that. I can speak to my first virtual event. It was a 2-day event, and probably every possible thing that could have gone wrong went wrong the first day, but the second day was great. So, so yeah, you kind of have to jump in with 2 feet, know that, this is all new for everyone. And we're doing a lot of A/B testing, as I like to say. So if something doesn't work, take note and you'll do better next time.
And I mean, speaking about the platforms and this event, I know you don't want to endorse anything specific. And I mean, originally there were so many, it was a bit overwhelming. And, originally there were not that many, it seemed like, but over the last 6 months, it just feels like there's dozens or hundreds that are suddenly available. And I mean, what would you say are some of the key things you look for from a virtual events platform?
Yeah, no, there actually are hundreds. I've been tracking it with a friend. So for real, there's certain ones that are definitely kind of raising to the top, either due to quality or great marketing. Okay. But I always start when I'm working with clients, so that whoever's hosting the event, to ask them kind of just, never mind the tech, what programming elements do you want? So say they absolutely want breakouts, right? Okay. They absolutely want and everything down to the detail, right? Do you want to be able to bring someone in on video from the audience? Though everything you list out kind of in that really detailed vision is a tech component. And so it almost helps you create a individualized RFP in a way where
Okay.
you can then know, like, I need X, Y, and Z capability, and then you find the tech that can do that. You might need to start to layer tech into what is known in tech terms as a tech stack.
Okay.
So there are a lot of platforms out there that are offering an all-in-one solution. And so, just some people have different opinions around that of like, can you do everything well? But then there, again, there's that ease, if you have an integrated platform with registration, with automated marketing, with, actual its own integrated live streaming, then that could make it easy for you. Right. So, I also really encourage people when picking a virtual event platform to think from every person's perspective. So obviously, number one, attendee, right? Making sure their experience is great. They're the ones paying, but guess who else is paying? Sponsors. Yeah. So really looking at event platforms from a sponsor's perspective. Where do they show up? Where are there logo banner opportunities throughout the quote unquote venue, for example? Right. This is one reason why, if you just do an event through Zoom, you have to get quite creative in how you have a sponsor show up versus a more kind of almost like landing page that these virtual event platforms offer. Okay. In addition, never forget about your speakers. So their point of view is going to be a little bit more like you, the organizer, and what is the back end support like for them when they're talking, and if there's a glitch, how are they communicating that to you? So I have seen some platforms take the speaker's perspective really, really seriously, and I actually enjoy that because essentially, again, what an event is, going back to that original question, the speakers are your content. So making sure they feel confident, making sure that their presentations are on point, high quality, actually really is important. And last but not least, don't forget about yourselves. I'm certainly willing to sacrifice a lot and kind of like a lot of these workarounds and, back end challenges to make sure that the front end audience, doesn't even know what's going on behind the curtain, per usual. But thinking from those four perspectives can help you start to whittle down which platform's working for you. Okay. We've already talked about the engagement needs. So what I have seen kind of, essentially I see a couple different splits happening in virtual event platforms. First and foremost is budget. So reviewing what budget you have to work with. Maybe you have, maybe you're moving an event that would have been on site to virtual. You might have some leftover budget that was going to be used for that venue, that was going to be used for food and beverage. So all of a sudden, $10,000 is nothing compared to the 100,000 or, several 100,000 you would have been spending. And so definitely you're seeing kind of the, I would generally say like, the under 8,000 and the above 8,000 is kind of the split I see. A lot of people come in, maybe with that $5,000 budget, and that's about what you should expect to pay for these all-inclusive sort of more economical virtual event platforms. And then, I already mentioned, do you need registration included? Are you using, talk about your tech stack, are you using a second source for registration? Maybe you already have one integrated with your membership program, for example. Do you need marketing automation? A lot of this can be nice if it works seamlessly and people that register are automatically plugged in to fill out a profile, and then their profile pops up on the page. That's quite easy. But if you're not using an all-inclusive platform, you're going to have to do some uploads. So when this is also really key, beyond demos, certainly you can attend, a quick 20-minute demo. It's not going to nearly show you enough of what you need to know to then live and breathe in that space. That's how I kind of see event planning. Once I can actually like dream about it, I know I'm fully in the planning mode. Know that you're there, attend events on that platform if you can, especially, if they're free or if you have a little budget, you'll get the attendee experience and start to really play around with it, and also chat with other organizers who maybe have used that platform. So that's where, again, event planners gather is a great place to be like, hey, has anyone used X, Y, And I've been fortunate enough to talk to fellow peers who've actually done, say, screen shares into what the back end looks like and how their setup worked, what they liked, what they didn't like. And so those are just some things to think about with virtual event planning virtual event platform selection.
Yep. That's super, huh? Wow. That's a really good, I'm going to go back and listen to that probably 3 or 4 times.
Well, great. We can, right? Time is now fluid.
Exactly. Exactly. This is Inception. We're all good. And I mean, it's really interesting too, because it's almost like for the event planner, the kind of requirements you mentioned in RFP previously, and previously we were worried about the tech stack would have been, the size of the room, the ceiling height, capacities, the food and beverage, and it's kind of like all of those supporting services have just kind of moved over to the virtual world. So it's a different stack. I think looking at it that way is very interesting, because at the end of the day, you're kind of doing the same job with a new stack of services in order to accomplish this goal.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. And, even more interestingly, we're just on kind of the cutting edge and beginning time of virtual events. So as we saw, maybe there were some platforms out there that have been doing this. Certainly I want to give them credit, but at the same time, you see a lot of, especially event apps, that kind of were more broadly accepted than expanding their services and offerings to include virtual event streaming, especially, and kind of especially, instead of a mobile device, accommodating that to a laptop or a desktop format. And so I would actually just tell people to give it time. From my experience with the platforms that I've either used or demoed, everything is in the pipeline, so to speak, again, tech terms. But it is really important to know that they're rapidly developing. So I'm actually really excited for, in a couple months even, you're going to, different platforms that maybe you demoed and weren't so psyched on, do kind of stay on, have them stay on your radar, vice versa, because it's really exciting to see what's being developed, and kind of in our in an economic way, people will try and stand out, and I think it's neat to see with that level of competition what different platforms are going to create.
Yeah, and 100%. And I mean, it's still so new. I think some people feel like they've missed the boat, maybe, that I should have jumped on to this earlier. But it's really in its infancy, it feels like. And I think for those people, you should not lose hope or feel like you've missed, but you can still learn these things and jump in. It's not too late. And I guess that kind of leads into another question too, which is, I mean, for someone that that's nervous to begin the journey or to begin the learning, or hasn't quite had the time, or for whatever, I mean, there's so much going on. There's economic factors, there's health factors, there's socioeconomic factors, like you mentioned. There's so many reasons that people have been able to do things or not been able to do things. And I mean, what advice would you give somebody now to jump in, somebody that's ready to make that, or somebody that's still a little bit hesitant to do so?
Yeah, I would certainly say that, it's definitely still, the wave is still growing, right? Think of surfing terms, you have not missed the wave by any means. And, this is, as I mentioned before, it absolutely is a time where, we are pushed into areas that we've maybe never been in before. And again, being really honest and transparent about that. And we're, especially as event planners, there's actually 2 types of minds. So again, back into psychology, There's 2 types of mindsets. There's perfectionist mindset, which is like, oh, I should have done this. Oh, this didn't go according to plan, et cetera. So it's easy to judge ourselves and be critical. I'm just going to acknowledge, especially as women, we're under like societal pressure to be a certain way and make everything perfect. But if you put on kind of that different hat, that growth mindset hat, that's when you start to be like, great, I tried my best and this is what I learned from it. It's a really just healthy way to look at your own work, and you can use these 2 different mindsets on everything you do in life, actually. But I would say that this is a time where being vulnerable is all of a sudden, that authenticity helps build trust. And so you're seeing a lot of relationships really fortifying now. And so it's actually a really wonderful opportunity to and in the day of influencers and social media, right? Authenticity is this buzzword, but it's trending for a reason, because people want to know they're human. You're not a robot. You're not perfect. And just, Murphy's Law I mentioned earlier, like expect that things will go wrong, plan for them as best you can. Especially with tech, you do need a lot more contingencies in place because you're not necessarily there. One of the hardest things I found was producing an event where, if someone's lost on site, you can find them in the hallway and be like, oh, let me help you get to where you're going. If someone's lost in the internet, you just hope they find their way. But so I think just coming at it with a positive attitude and making sure that your team is on board. You'll plan the best you can. You all are professionals, maybe listening to this, and having the understanding that if you're ever going to experiment, now absolutely is the time. So take advantage, fail, try again, set realistic expectations, both not only with your client, I actually do it with the audience. So certainly you never want to admit that like, hey guys, this is our first time doing this, but maybe you do. And you acknowledge that technology, no matter how intuitive it is, you've been looking at it longer than them. So giving your audience a second to catch up to speed and being like, hey, this is where the agenda is. Even though it's a giant word that says agenda, you kind of have to handhold a little bit more, as we've seen, and really educate the audience on how to be a good virtual audience.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's great advice. That's great advice. And like you said, the experimentation is so important. And I think, I could be wrong. Let's see what you think about this, but it feels like it's a little bit more accessible too. Somebody that wanted to start producing or experimenting with physical events, it may have been a little bit more difficult to do so. Right now people are producing events on Zoom. They get a free account on Zoom, and you can do really small kind of introductory events and work your way up. And there's not a lot of, not the same sort of investment required to do so. And it's very easy to experiment in a virtual world for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think always start with your content, right? If your content is good, all the other, I always think of event planning in general, like get the cake right. Make it the most delicious vanilla cake. And then all the frosting, all the decoration, that's just, that's that level up. And that's great. But, if you have the most beautiful decoration and frosting, but really bad cake, it's not going to end well.
It doesn't matter.
So I really encourage people to think of it like that. And so just like you mentioned, anyone who's anyone can do a virtual event. And if you have just really solid content, that's going to come through. The next thing I would encourage you to focus on, if you're going to do anything to level up your experience, is audio. If right now, I'm just going to show, I'm using a special little mic here. I see that you have your lapel mic, but that it's so fascinating to watch an event where, everything can even look good, but if the audio quality isn't great, that's actually why there's Zoom fatigue right now, is because the quality is a little bit lacking. So there's a reason that you binge watch Netflix or watch TV. It's because the quality of production is good. And so we can just take a little bit of lessons from, especially the TV world, and I've actually done this study with a friend. You can have, say, even like a kind of fuzzy image or not the best background or whatnot, but if it sounds okay, that's excellent. And actually then you can pull the audio and make a podcast out of it. So, there's a kind of win-win there. But that would just be my small experience or small kind of experiment I'd encourage you to do. In addition, I do want to comment on that access piece. I think it's really important to note, not only is it accessible more for the organizers, but actually also for the attendees. So people don't have those expenses of flights, of hotel rooms, of even maybe ticket costs are more affordable through virtual. And then also there's the environmental component. Think of that, right? Then you don't have the it's so funny. I actually don't own a car. So in Portland, it's super bike friendly. So I always do my little carbon emissions calculator every year, and everything's perfectly, under the norm and usual and doing really good until I get to flights, because I fly everywhere for work. And so the emissions through flights and air traffic is astronomical. And so think of the good we're doing environmentally by hosting events virtually. If that's a motivation, and if that's a value for you, your client, do think that, think about that and how virtual can affect the total kind of carbon emissions.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a very important, I think it's hard to see the positive when so many people in the industry are suffering, because it's been a bit of an apocalypse for certain industries within the industry. But I think if you look for it, there can be silver linings like this. And the climate is a huge one. I think the carbon emissions is a great point. The accessibility and just being able to do this stuff from home. I don't think it'll ever 100% replace the value of seeing people, but I do think that the impact on the climate will certainly be a net positive for sure.
If anyone's worried that virtual is going to take over on-site events, let me quell your fears right now. Everyone is yearning for that connection. And there's a reason, right, why we even have the video framed as we do. The most impactful connections psychologically are actually shown to happen within 4 feet. So if you can create that mimicking, even right now, Jason, you seem like you're 4 feet away from me, even though you're thousands of miles away. So I think we definitely, we are social creatures. We yearn for those connections in that community. And there's so much you can translate through screen, but also, maybe you're missing out on some of the body language and just even the energy that you feel from a room. And so absolutely, I think, both are here to stay. And don't you worry if you're just hanging tight for, virtual is not your thing. I think there are safe ways to do on-site events. It is the event organizer's responsibility to keep people safe. So really take that seriously. And there are new protocol coming out through, say in America, the CDC or whatnot, to produce events. I've seen conferences already happening. I know hotel venues especially are taking it really seriously and working on capacity, traffic flow, et cetera, to support on-site events. Just, be careful out there.
Yeah, 100%. Now, kind of shifting a little bit, I just want to have a quick one about collaborations, because I find something like this so cool that, we met recently, we reached out to each other and found a way to collaborate. And I see this happening much more than before. Obviously, I think people were much more busy. People weren't at home as much, obviously. But I find it just fascinating that so many of us are meeting, even if it's through a screen. Are you experiencing the same thing? Has it been the same sort of feedback in the United States, and the same kind of people looking for other people in the industry and looking for support?
I would definitely say so. I don't know, if you and I are unique in that we're seeking it too. So definitely, you can't just sort of like sit back and wait for people to come to you.
Right. Yeah.
It's a two-way street. So, so there is that aspect, but, definitely I think that people are, I'm such a strong believer that, all boats rise with the tide. And so, if you have a question about virtual events and haven't done it before, people who've done it are willing to share. And those that want to hold their cards close aren't going to receive the same benefit as that, kind of share economy and that collaboration that you might get from being vulnerable and supporting one another. So that's just the attitude I go into most things. But I think, potentially people might be bored, they've been at home, and when some, a stranger, so to speak, or kind of a peer they may not have known reaches out, it is exciting. And maybe that's the new person you talk to that day. So people do feel more accessible. This is just my opinion and perception. But just to give a small anecdote, I had met a gentleman who worked with the USOPC, so the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, at an event that I had attended in Hachioji, Japan. And then we reconnected because I was like, hey, you know, checking in on you. And this is a great opportunity also to reconnect with your network. I think, you know, as simple as that statement, I'm not a big fan of how are you doing? I think that it's too loaded of a question these days.
Absolutely.
But if you can show that you care and just say like, hey, checking in on you, this is what's up in my world, you know, and would love to catch up. Something as simple as that I've seen really well received. And so I did that for this gentleman that I'd met. We ended up talking, and then he ends up introducing me to the events director with the USOPC. So you just never know where these connections are going to lead. Yeah. And so if you're kind of one of those natural networkers, now is a wonderful time where, you know, I think we have this sense of we're in it together. I see this a lot with, fortunately or unfortunately, I've actually managed several events where there's been sort of these mini natural disasters. So at X Games Austin, there was, you know, flash flooding and a lightning storm. At the Seco Black Master Series, a 55-foot climbing wall over 750,000 gallons of water pool. Wow. Then there's a lightning storm. So it's amazing in these states of crises or emergency how people band together. You can see this if you're an outdoor enthusiast. Maybe you've gone on a hiking or backpacking or camping trip. And when the weather kind of turns, those I find are the most kind of like fun stories where people really did bond and sort of like just support one another. And so you're seeing that on a much grander scale. And so it's these, I'm sure there's a term for it. Me and my philosophy and psychology studies, but really it's just amazing that in a time of need, we are social creatures and we do support one another. And it's the people with kind of that attitude that are then going to thrive in the end, because, you know, it's golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. And when you need some help, you know, ask for it. When you can give some help, give it. That's really important to remember too. And people are out there. LinkedIn is a great way to meet. That's how we met, Jason and I. And in addition, just exploring your network, maybe if you're seeking, especially a specific vendor, let's bring this back to events, you know, just tapping your network and be like, hey, does anyone know an event technologist? I never thought I'd be asking for that. Yeah, exactly. But there are people out there, and there's also just wonderful, you know, right now is an opportunity to be human, to be vulnerable, and to open up to people you may not have talked to that look different than you, think different than you. That diversity of thought is super important as well in the events that we produce. Definitely.
And I think what you said too is really important to kickstart that by having the courage to reach out in the first place too. Because these things, they usually will not just come to you. I think you've got to, it happens. We get lucky sometimes, but I think everything you said is so true, and kickstarting it, you have to be the person to put your foot on the gas a little bit.
Totally.
Before I let you go, I wanted to just talk about your background. Can we?
Sure,
this is a bit off script, huh?
Yeah, no, great.
But we were like some best practices for backgrounds, because I really like your background, and it's something that I see.
My actual virtual event background. I'm thinking like, let me tell you my life story.
We can go into that on a separate episode for sure.
I'll be back with you guys. Stay tuned. Yeah,
exactly. But because so often I see like, you talked about audio, which is super important. And I totally agree. It's like you're asking somebody to pay attention for an hour. If they have to use any extra energy to pay attention because the audio is not there, you're going to lose them faster. And background is the same. Like there's so many times where I see camera levels, lightings. It's just, you're losing people, and it's something that's not that difficult to do. So I just, maybe you could, before we sign off and before I let you go, kind of talk about a little bit about good practices in the background.
Sure thing. Yeah. Quick steps about background from Chloe Mandell. Okay, let's do this. So yeah, first and foremost, number one, make sure that your camera is eye level. It's going to make someone see as if you're looking into their eyes. Another thing that's actually really tough to do, and what I've been, working on, is talking into your camera. So right now I see Jason through my periphery, but I'm staring right at you into the camera. And, if you're using an alternative source for your camera, some people are definitely noting that the built-in cameras into certain, say, laptops aren't up to snuff. And so, say your camera is then right above, like the actual lens you're using is right above your screen, you're going to actually want to look there. So that's number one. Number two, lighting. So lighting, I actually was using, it's so funny, these little kind of LED lights, but you'll notice that I turned them off because I'm going to give you even something to think about is time of day. So we started talking in the morning. It was 8 a.m. here in Portland, Pacific Standard Time, and the sun actually hadn't fully come up. And so you'll notice maybe throughout this talk, if you're paying attention, it actually got brighter. So accommodating. So if you're going to be talking, for example, when it's getting darker, you probably actually want to close your window and not rely on that light source and build in another light source. These LED lights and whatnot, they're so cheap these days. They're no longer sold out. They were at the beginning. Influencers use them all the time. Ring lights, you can get them for like $20-$30. So US dollars. But just making sure, okay, what light sources do I have on right now? I have my dining room light. Even in the back, you'll notice that I put on a light there just so you want to make sure you're not backlit though. So say you're in front of a window, that's really maybe not the best, but right now, Jason, I can comment like, yes, you have that back sliding door. It's not, taking away from the experience. I see you have a light on to your right or left. And so use the light sources that you have. You don't need to spend a ton. Next, think about composition. So there is this thing in photography and also videography for rule of thirds. Right now, I'm not actually doing the best job at how I've positioned my screen, but you can kind of see the plant is roughly 2/3. And then I have my living room as another third. And I happen to be in the center. Sometimes it's nice, actually, if you're a little bit off to one side or not. But do think about what is directly behind you. So maybe like pick up a couple things, make sure, again, I love how you put it, Jason, whatever is going to distract them from the content, make sure you can eliminate that the best you can. Maybe you have a giant TV behind you, throw up a sheet or a pretty blanket or whatnot. Make sure, if your books are kind of haphazardly situated, maybe kind of file them nicely.
Organize them.
So little things that you can do, organizing them, little things you can do to support your background just to make it, as clean as possible. Then again, I wouldn't think what's actually really neat is that you can do a blank wall. That's fine. What you're missing if you do that is lack of character. So let's actually do a quick little study right now. So right now I could do this blank wall. But you don't get a sense as much of who I am and what I'm into design. I'm kind of this creative. I like plants. So all of a sudden, just by turning the camera, boom, you get kind of this really neat, frame and into my life. And right now is really a special time because we do get that little window into people's lives. What does your home look like? Maybe your pet comes up and that's really special experience to share. And we don't often, get that in normal lives even. Maybe your kids come, I think that's where we talked about those connections happening. And a lot of those connections happen because we're videoing in from our home. And so don't discredit that it's, it's a mistake or it's imperfect. If anything, that imperfection is what's going to make it more kind of relatable. And I would encourage everyone to just think conscientiously around. We talked about framing, how close you are to the camera, where you're looking, and your lighting.
Nice. Perfect. 100%. I think with a little bit of thought and a little bit of effort, you can totally change the experience. That was an awesome example, just moving sideways like this. Exact same room, exact same setup, but a totally different background. And it totally changes the experience that people are going to have watching the video screen. Amazing. That has been really, really awesome. I've enjoyed this a lot, great. Chloe. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for dropping a ton of knowledge. I think this is going to be one that's rewatchable. So yeah, I'll throw this up soon. We'll put all the show notes, the links that you've talked about, some of the products, the resources that you've talked about. And yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. I hope that we can get to do it again.
Yeah, no, I would love that. And if anyone has any questions from this, feel free to reach me on Instagram at Mandell Experiences. Perfect. That's Mandell with 2 L's. And I would be happy to answer any questions you have and continue to be a resource for you all.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll share all of the connection details too on the website as well, so they can get in touch with you by email, by phone, by whatever it is. But we'll find a way. But this has been amazing. There's so much value here, so I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, excellent! I'm so glad. Yeah, definitely. Good luck, everyone out there.
Cool. All right.
We got this. Yeah.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. This has been Breakouts with me, your host, Jason Greenman. If you like what you've seen or heard, please subscribe, follow our channels, and if you have a minute, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.